Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. If you do any kind of burn down on your farm, or if you're looking for a residual herbicide in front of many crops, you may be choosing something that contains sharpen. We're going to talk more about this product today because I think it's one that is getting more widespread use across the country, but could even be on some more acres.
We also want to talk a little about continuous corn. Now, over the last few years, there have been a lot of continuous corn acres in the United States. There's a little talk that going into next year, some of those acres might go to soybeans, but we'll talk about some of the reasons why guys love continuous corn and how you can make continuous corn even more successful on your farm next year.
Well, one of the challenges though, Brian, of going continuous corn is weed control, and our weed of the week may be one of those weeds that could be a little bit fun to fight. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk a little about noxious weeds. If you're a non-farmer, you might be wondering, well, what's a noxious weed? That's why we wanted to get into it.
Well, okay, noxious is a pretty tough term, and you may think, wow, that must mean poisonous weeds or weeds that are super dangerous for me. Well, it's not necessarily dangerous for you. When we think about noxious weeds, we're looking at weeds that can seriously hurt the land, for example, like leafy spurge. When it chokes out all the other vegetation out there, and leafy spurge is not something that our cattle really want to eat, all of a sudden our pasture ground is just worthless. That could be one way. It could be a weed that could hurt animals or could hurt wildlife in the area, but more commonly we're looking at really difficult to control perennial weeds that can just take over the vegetation in a certain area.
So I think about Canada thistle, even on our own farm. Years ago, before we had really good herbicides to stop Canada thistle, I didn't even know what to do because tillage didn't destroy this plant. It was, and still is, obviously, a perennial plant. It's got these rhizomes running below ground. So even if you kill the plant that you see right here today, because of those rhizomes running far out from the main plant, quite often you'll find little shoots sticking up maybe 5, 10, 20 feet away. They're all tied to that one plant. Well, when you go in and do some tillage and you cut those roots up a little bit, now you've got a whole bunch of separate plants, and unfortunately it seems like they have a way of surviving. So until we got good herbicides, it was really difficult to stop this particular weed, and that's the reason why it was a noxious weed. Fortunately now today we have some good products in pastures. A guy can go out with Milestone or even Tordon, and in crop ground, thanks to Roundup Crops, we've got Roundup, which can kill perennial weeds like Canada thistle.
And Stinger has always been a good one too for Canada thistle if we're in a crop like small grains or corn, something like that. There are lots of choices out there now, and here's one of the things that I was thinking about too, Brian, is just how do we control noxious weeds? You know, a lot of people will say, well, why don't we get some bugs that will feed on them and get them under control? And it takes time to do that, and it takes a lot of bugs to do that. With herbicides, we can actually get down into that root system, kill that weed once and for all. I think herbicides have been very good for controlling noxious weeds. Like for example, on our great-grandpa's farm, I remember when we were kids and we were out walking soybeans, well, we'd pull all the annual weeds, but the thistles, it's like, wow, it's not going to do us any good. We could cut it off at the ground and it'll just grow back again. And I remember our great uncle say, all right, boys, I've fought this Canada thistle for 40 years. Now it's your turn. And a few years later, we had Roundup Ready crops and we completely wiped it out. And we had Stinger that we were using in our corn and we just about completely wiped it out.
Okay, when you come back to using bugs to control weeds, what I get concerned about, I've done a lot of entomology work in my lifetime, and I had this great entomologist who was a kind of a mentor to me, and he just said, anytime you're going to bring in something else like a bug to control either another bug or a weed, what harm is that bug going to do for you long term? Well, in a lot of cases, we don't know for sure. When you go use a herbicide, all that herbicide is 100% gone in a year or two, maybe it's 2 or 3 years, but with that bug, it might be around for not just one lifetime, but it might be around for 100 years, and it might do a whole bunch of harm to the next crop that we decide we're going to raise in this particular area. It's a lot more dangerous to do that. That's why people get really concerned about using bugs as opposed to herbicides.
Well, when you have noxious weeds, it is very important that you get them under control, and in many cases you are required by law, whether it's the county that's going to be watching you or federal agencies that are going to be watching you,
or the state,
to control those weeds so they don't spread from your farm or from your field or from your roadside. So you'll see a lot of farmers out throughout the entire season. If those weeds are up, they're going to have to either mow them down or spray them or do something to get them under control.
And if they don't, the county or the state or even the federal government can go in on their land. They have permission to do this in the United States and go in on their land and control that weed and charge the farmer for it and fine the farmer because he didn't control that noxious weed. This is a serious deal. These are the most invasive, most destroying, economically damaging weeds that we have in the country. They're called noxious weeds. There are different weeds that are noxious by state level as opposed to the federal level. There are some weeds that are noxious weed across the entire United States, others that are just by state, and just in a particular state it's a big problem. But the point is, anytime you have a noxious weed as a farmer or a non-farmer, you've got to get that thing under control.
Well, fortunately for us, our weed of the week is not a noxious weed. Can you identify this week's weed?
What's next in weed control technology? Roundup Ready 2 Extend soybeans, an advanced soybean product with tolerance to dicamba and glyphosate. Roundup Ready 2 Extend soybeans. Extend your control.
If a new machine storage building or shop has been on your mind, it's time to call Morton Buildings. Now through the end of February, take advantage of discount pricing during our Building Value Days sales event. For over 110 years, Morton has served the American farmer with quality buildings for a variety of uses that meet your needs and style. Give us a call or visit us online and join generations of customers who've discovered the quality and dependability of a Morton building.
Capello corn headers are designed for producers who expect more. Expect more grain in your bin. Expect an industry-leading 2-year manufacturer's warranty. Expect Capello-designed chopping and folding options that save you time and money. And whether red, green, or yellow, expect row size options that fit your operation because all producers deserve the best. Expect Capello. It's a head above the rest.
For lower cost, higher production, Mandaco Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving and rocks and has contour conformity equaling 0 downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted coulter angles make residue management easier, less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandaco Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandaco Agri dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
A proven herbicide for decades, dicamba can provide burn-down residual control of tough and resistant weeds for up to 14 days. That's another reason why farmers will use dicamba for years to come. Brought to you by Roundup Ready Plus Weed Management Solutions.
Over the last few years, continuous corn has really grown in popularity in the United States thanks to the good price of corn, the demand that there's been from livestock and ethanol, and a lot of farmers have been interested in this, but the problem is in a lot of cases, guys have tried to grow continuous corn and they've had issues. So we want to talk about that just a little bit today, what the issues were and what the solutions are.
One of the other things, Brian, is Roundup resistant weeds. There are a number of farmers that I talked to across the country that said, you know, I'm going to go back to raising corn because I can kill the weeds there. In soybeans, I'm really really having a tough time.
Because a lot of these resistant weeds are broadleaf weeds, and it's always easier to kill a broadleaf in a grass crop like corn. We have a lot of good weed control options in corn.
But here's the downside though. Guys said, I'm going to plant more corn, but here's the problem. In my second year of corn, I'm expecting to get less yield than I did my first year. And I say, well, why is that? Why should you get less yield? In many cases, we're getting more yield the more years we raise corn in a row. And one of the big keys is we've got a lot of residue after a corn production. And so we've got lots of high carbon, low nitrogen residue. And when we add nitrogen fertilizer back into the mix, the bacteria that are going to break down that residue will often tie a lot of that nitrogen up as we start the process of breaking down residue. So that's one of the big challenges. The other big challenge is, in most cases, many farmers who are doing a 2-year supply of fertilizer have completely underestimated the amount of fertilizer that corn is taking up. So as we've already grown 1 year of corn and taken more fertilizer out than what we put back into the field, now we're going into year 2 in a depleted soil and doing that same program again where we're not putting on enough fertilizer. And you can see how this problem is going to compound itself, and in just a few years we're going to have some issues if we don't address it.
For all those things, we absolutely can address them and we can fix those problems, and we'll talk about that. But the one issue that we can't fix is the fact that if we're going to raise big-time corn yields, it takes a lot of water. If we're going to raise soybeans on our farm, for example, it takes a little bit less water to raise the soybean crop than the corn crop, and also when the water comes is a little different. With corn, we need the water just a little bit earlier in the year. Soybeans need their water in August especially. So depending on when you're getting rainfall in your area and the total amount of rainfall you get, that may be a reason to stay away from continuous corn. But assuming you get normal rains, I mean, chances are you're not going to have a drought year every year, hopefully at least on your farm. So if you get normal rains, we look at this continuous corn thing, and kind of where Darren started was on this residue that you have out there. The point is you can build organic matter on your farm, and when you do that and build organic matter in your soil, you're going to have a richer soil. You've got a lot more long-term potential to raise high yields. That's all stuff we want to do. But here's the problem. A lot of guys look at corn and say, oh my goodness, there's all this residue I have to deal with. I have to do major tillage. In a lot of cases, you don't have to do that. Here are our suggestions. Number 1, use a chopping corn head. Get those pieces of residue in as small a piece as possible because it's going to break down a lot quicker. 2, make sure you have ample nitrogen out there to help break down that residue. So either you put on lots of nitrogen during the year and there's plenty in your stock yet, or if you're a little bit short towards the end of the year, throw some more nitrogen and throw a little sulfur with it in the fall to help break those stalks down. The other thing is try to leave your roots as much intact as possible. That's actually where organic matter comes from. It's not all the residue you see on top of the ground. It's the roots. As much as you see above ground, when you see a great big corn plant out there, that's how big the root system is. So just think what happens when all that breaks down, it decays in the soil. That's what builds your organic matter. So leave that root system intact as much as you can.
Well, building up organic matter is one of the goals for me, and that's why I've been doing some continuous corn, because I've got this high residue crop that's going to help me accomplish my goals if I'm leaving that root mass intact. Now, to do that, we've got to get the right fertility program out there too. And you addressed what the nitrogen needs are going to be.
I didn't really get into that too much though, and that's a very key point. Typically, we're talking an extra 50 to maybe even as much as 100 pounds more nitrogen that you need in that continuous corn rotation, at least for the first 3 years or so, as opposed to when you're raising corn on soybean ground.
Well, you've got to get the whole system going. You got to have enough nitrogen out there that the bacteria can break down that residue. And I can already hear some of the nervousness. Hey, I don't want to put too much nitrogen out there and then I'm just going to lose it. A lot of that nitrogen is going to get tied up by the bacteria in this residue breakdown process. So if you do put just a little bit extra on, that's okay in most cases because it's going to be all tied up in the process. So it's going to release over time. But you need to have some sort of guideline about how much you can put on at one time. This is where our good soil sampling program comes into play. We look at the cation exchange capacity, and our general rule of thumb is take your cation exchange capacity times 10. That will tell you the approximate amount of nitrogen that your soil can hold at any one time. So let's just say your cation exchange capacity is 20. You multiply that times 10, that equals 200 pounds of nitrogen you could hold at one time. So if you have a little bit of carryover from last year, let's just say you have 20 pounds of nitrogen left from your last crop. That means you could put another 180 pounds on to get up to your full 200 if you want. That's not saying you have to put it out at any certain time of the year. I'm just saying that let's just look at it as I'm going to put on 250 total. I can only have 200 out there at any one point. So I can put some out early and then I can come back side dress or a later application in the season once some of that nitrogen has gotten used up.
So here's the other big thing with corn. Yes, we don't want to lose that nitrogen, but we'd also like to keep it in the right form in the soil. Plants want to take in ammonium nitrogen as opposed to nitrate nitrogen. They can pull both in, but the problem is when they pull the nitrate in, they have to convert it over to ammonium anyway, so that takes extra energy. So use a nitrogen stabilizer, split apply your nitrogen like Darren had mentioned, and then you'll be a lot better off long term.
And in terms of fertility, we do have the free Ag PhD fertilizer removal app you can download on your smartphone or on your tablet. Take a look at that. Type in your yield goal, but don't just look at what the grain is going to remove. Look at what your stover is going to need also. Make sure you have plenty of P and K and sulfur and micros available for your whole crop so you don't have issues with standability or yield.
Well, the other thing, we talked a little about the residue already, but I just wanted to finish up on that real quick. So we said try not to destroy those roots below ground. Well, if you've got a whole bunch of residue on top of the ground, you say, well, how am I going to get rid of all that? On our farm, we've gone to strip till. We've also done a fair amount of using something like a twister. It's got coulters, and all we're doing is getting a little bit of soil up along with that residue, and we're cutting the residue just a little bit more so it breaks down faster. If we do that in the fall, we do some strip till also in the fall, we don't have a lot of residue left by spring, and then we can get a good seed bed. We can plant that crop well. That's our big concern. We want to make sure we've got a warm seed bed to go into. We get the crop up and running as quickly as possible, because that does sometimes become an issue in continuous corn with a colder seed bed.
Well, let's talk about planting that crop, and it all starts with picking the right variety or the right hybrid. There's a lot. We can talk about continuous corn all day long, but let's just real quickly talk about which hybrid is going to be successful for you. You need to choose a hybrid based on, number one, your defensive characteristics that you have to have. For example, if you have Gauss's wilt, it's a bacterial disease. There's really no way to stop it in crop that's been highly effective and consistent. So you have to pick a tolerant hybrid.
Because Gauss's wilt is a lot worse in continuous corn.
Now, if you've got gray leaf spot, I would strongly suggest picking a hybrid that can handle gray leaf spot, in addition to using a good fungicide program later on.
Well, once again, continuous corn absolutely can be successful in most operations. Just make sure you're addressing the nutrients. Try to build your soil organic matter if you can by not totally destroying the root system going from year to year, and pick the right hybrids based on a continuous corn situation.
Well, one of the weeds that may pop up in any crop rotation is our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Capello corn headers are designed for producers who expect more. Expect more grain in your bin. Expect an industry-leading 2-year manufacturer's warranty. Expect Capello-designed chopping and folding options that save you time and money. And whether red, green, or yellow, expect row size options that fit your operation, because all producers deserve the best. Expect Capello. It's a head above the rest.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
With spring right around the corner, get your Case IH equipment ready with Titan Machinery's Uptime Maintenance Program. Uptime is Titan's preventative maintenance inspection, designed to eliminate costly downtime during the short planting season. Our technicians average nearly 10 years of experience and use a comprehensive Case IH factory checklist to find potential problems before they slow you down. Use your Titan Access account and make no payment and pay no interest until spring 2014 for qualifying uptime specials. Plant worry-free with Titan Machinery. Better solutions.
I wish I could apply all the PK and micronutrients this crop needs at planting.
You can. When your soils are not excessively nutrient deficient, you can apply a whole season of PK and micronutrients when you plant and get top yields at harvest. AgroLiquid's exceptional nutrient compatibility and superior efficiency allows you to prescription apply everything your crop needs safely and conveniently. Research proves it. For more info, go to agroliquid.com.
Honey wagon? Can the sweet talk. Out here we treat manure, and when we talk treats, we don't mean cupcakes. Treating manure with More Than Manure Nutrient Manager can reduce solids in your pit or lagoon and ammonia levels in confinement buildings. PU, try N and P. MTM is the first and only nutrient manager proven to reduce nitrogen loss and phosphorus lockup. That's fertilizer loaded with yield potential. Looking for proof? Check the bin. Isn't that sweet? Results you can't ignore, a pit you finally can.
A few years ago, there was a lot of advertising on this new product, Kixor. And so I told BASF, hey, your new product, Kixor, looks great. In trials, I want to use some on my farm. And they said, well, you can't buy it. I said, what do you mean I can't buy it? Nope, but you can buy Sharpen. That's got 100% Kixor in it. I said, well, why didn't you just name the product Kixor? Well, we want to make sure that people know that Kixor is the product that powers Verdict, and it powers this product and that product and the other product. And I thought, that seems crazy to me. So anyway, today we're talking about Sharpen. Some of you may know it as Kixor.
Well, the good thing about Kixor, or Sharpen in this case, is it can be used on many crops. It does a great job burning down weeds. The other thing is it has soil residual. So not only will it burn them down, it will keep them down for a period of time, depending on which rate you use. The downside of Sharpen is that it really only works on broadleaf weeds. So if you want a good burn down out in your field, you're probably going to have to tank mix it with a Roundup or something else that's going to kill the grasses as well. But Sharpen is excellent in a number of ways. It's very fast in the burn down, and that's something that many farmers have liked across the country, saying, wow, I threw a little bit of that in with my Roundup, and instead of having to wait 2 weeks, stuff was crispy within just a few days.
Okay, but here's the problem. I can't use much Sharpen when I'm going to plant a broadleaf crop like soybeans, for example. 1 ounce of Sharpen is the most that I can use, and even that, I get a little bit concerned. So I just want to make sure that I'm doing it right, that I'm not overdoing it or overlapping or anything like that, that 1 ounce is my maximum rate. In corn or wheat, I can certainly go with higher rates. The other thing is, even when I go with higher rates in corn or wheat, the product's not going to last forever. It's not going to have as long a residual as certain other herbicides out there, but it does have pretty nice residual for at least the first few weeks of the season, helping to hold those broadleaf weeds down.
All right, we talked about pre-emerge use, and Sharpen is not labeled to be used in crop, except when you use it for desiccation at the end of the season.
Yeah, so if you want to finish a crop off, you've got some weeds to control, you want to speed your harvest up, you certainly can use this as a desiccant. Just make sure you're using the labeled adjuvants and use it at a labeled rate in labeled crops.
But just know this, with Sharpen, anytime you're using it, it's great at burning down broadleaf weeds. It can be tank mixed with other products like Roundup, for example.
And it does have some residual.
And you're going to get residual out of it, so you're going to get control not just today, but for a few weeks down the road.
Well, the question is, will Sharpen help us control our weed of the week? We'll tell you coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Your farm tells a story, one that continues with the decisions you make. Introducing the Enlist Weed Control System, an advanced herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate for exceptional control of tough weeds. The next chapter begins.
Our weed of the week is a broadleaf. It's prickly Sida.
Well, this is one of those weeds again. We don't have this one on our farm, thank goodness, but it is fairly easy to identify. When you're looking at prickly Sida, one of the things that I'll notice is down towards the base of those petioles, where that leaf blade is going to hook up to the stem, you'll see some small spines there. That's one of the key identifying features of this weed that's also known as tea weed. I hear that a lot as we travel around the country. How do you kill tea weed?
Well, I think about it a lot like I do velvet leaf. So yes, not all the weed killers are the same, but it is kind of difficult to control. The common grass herbicides in corn, for example, like Harness, Surpass, Outlook, and Dual, are going to do almost nothing for it. Balance Flex has some activity. The best one out there is probably Sharpen, which would be found in Verdict.
Post-emergent corn, though, we can get it under control. I like Callisto, Lotus, and Impact. If you're mixing some atrazine with them, the same would be said with Status. If you're mixing some atrazine in there, I think it does a nice job.
Okay, when we go to soybeans, we'd like to see Valor, Authority, along with Metribuzin down, post-emerge, if Roundup isn't controlling it. Now, Roundup is still doing a fairly decent job if you get that prickly Sida when it's small, and if you use a high rate of Roundup.
I'm not going to count on Roundup. I'm either going to plant Liberty Link soybeans, so I can use Liberty. That'd be a great option. Otherwise, you can use Basagran, but Basagran is just so expensive. I don't understand why it has to be this expensive, but it does actually do a decent job on prickly Sida.
Okay, so what are you going to do in wheat other than put Sharpen down pre-emerge? What are you going to go
Sharpen
with post?
pre is good, but then I like wide match plus Addition broad spec. That would be my tank mix that I'd use post-emerge, and I'll do a nice job on prickly
But
Sida.
Husky's probably not too bad. It's just that we don't commonly fight major issues with prickly Sida in wheat. Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week, prickly Sida, but stay tuned, Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
What are farmers doing to feed the planet? They're using Quadtrek technology, soil management, and planting systems from Case IH to foster a better growing environment that maximizes yield potential. Visit caseih.com to be ready.
On a recent Iron Talk, we discussed tractors with front-end loaders and how you may weight the rear axle to be able to handle the weight on the front of the tractor. Now, when you're doing that, we've gotten a lot of questions about what's the best way to weight that rear axle. We'll discuss that in today's Iron Talk. Let's assume your rear tires are radial tires. Now, as you set the pressure on your radial tires to the axle weight, you lengthen out the footprint and get a more comfortable ride. Now, in most machines, the tire is your suspension system. When you add fluid to a radial tire, you start decreasing the amount of flexibility the casing has and also the amount of air that's in the tire. By instead adding proper cast weights for the load you're carrying, the longer your tires will last, the more comfortable your ride on the road and in the field, and the better your traction will be, and the more efficient you will be in the long run with that piece of equipment. So when you're weighting those rear tires with radial tires, we suggest using cast weights. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now, back to the show.
Whether you're feeding cattle, milking cows, or baling hay, the work on your farm is never done. Which is why you need equipment that works as hard as you do. Get the efficiency and versatility you need with Case IH. From farm-all compact and utility tractors to balers and mowers, all Case IH equipment is designed with one thing in mind: getting the job done. To learn more, visit caseih.com/livestock.
Upgrade your trailer to electric with the Rolltech electric system from AgriCover. Strong, flexible pivot arms and motor mount rotate and telescope, allowing the roll tube to rise and flex over heaped loads. The positive automatic lock is impossible to back off to control the flow of grain. This integrated system uses one wireless remote to operate up to 10 tarps and hoppers, keeping your driver out of the dust, rain, and harm's way. See the Rolltech system in action at an AgriCover dealer near you.
If you watch Ag PhD TV, you'll love the new Ag PhD radio show each weekday on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80. This is Darren Hefty. On the new Ag PhD radio program, we'll take live callers and provide the agronomic information and brotherly banter you've come to expect from Ag PhD. We'll feature a Back 40 segment where we talk to farmers and agronomists around the country to share what's going on with crop production. And it wouldn't be Ag PhD without addressing a pest of the day. Tune in to the Ag PhD radio show each weekday at 2 p.m. Central on Rural Radio Sirius XM Channel 80.
If a new machine storage building or shop has been on your mind, it's time to call Morton Buildings. Now through the end of February, take advantage of discount pricing during our Building Value Days sales event. For over 110 years, Morton has served the American farmer with quality buildings for a variety of uses that meet your needs and style. Give us a call or visit us online and join generations of customers who've discovered the quality and dependability of a Morton building.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
The all-new S-Cube commercial tender is the only tender on the market with poly tanks, giving you the capability to haul seed, fertilizer, water, or liquid fertilizer. Each cube can hold 300 units of seed, 2,000 gallons of liquid, or 300 cubic feet of fertilizer. Options include full functioning wireless remote, stainless steel conveyors, and self-contained hydraulics. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but be sure to join us again next time for another Weed of the Week, Iron Talk, Farm Basics, and much more. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
American ethanol is made primarily from corn. Did you realize that the type of corn used for ethanol and livestock feed is much different than the sweet corn on your dinner table? For more information, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.